very soon. So let's start with just a review of the axial and appendicular skeletons. Remember that the axial skeleton consists of the skull, the vertebrae, and the ribs, and also the vertebrae here. The appendicular skeleton consists of the arms from the clavicle and the scapula in the back, all the way through to the ends, and the hands. In addition, the appendicular skeleton consists of the legs, which would also include these, which are called the coxal bones, and your thigh bone, known as the femur, and of course these bones all the way through to your feet. So let's begin by identifying just the major names of these bones. Eventually you will be expected to know several smaller structures on each of these, but let's first begin by using the correct anatomical names. So let's begin with the skull. The skull consists of two sets of bones. The first set of bones is called the cranial bones. Cranial bones encase the brain and protect it. They are flat bones, they're curved, and they're connected by small, tiny, little kind of jagged lines, and these joints are known as sutures. The remaining bones of the skull are called the facial bones, and the facial bones make up all of this that we would consider to be your face. They create openings for our senses, such as our sense of vision, smell, and hearing. They also provide openings into the human body, and they provide the structure of our face, attachment points for muscles. Moving on, we have vertebrae. There are 26 vertebrae in the human body. They are not structured the same way. As you can see, those at the top portion, the superior portion of the body, are slightly different in their organization than those on the inferior aspect of the human body. If we look at the posterior side of the skeleton, you can also see that the vertebrae are quite different. Very narrow on the superior portion and quite wide at the inferior portion. In addition, you can see these projections on the sides, called transverse processes, are wider inferiorly than they are superiorly. There are three sections of bones here. The cervical vertebrae, which make up most of your neck. There are 7. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae, all attached to a rib, and then there are 5 lumbar. The axial skeleton ends with these structures here and here. This is called the sacrum, and this is called, this tiny little end you would call your tailbone, is called the coccyx. The coccyx comes from the Greek word cuckoo. Because of its shape, it resembles a bird's beak. So that's how it was given the name coccyx. This is all of the bones of the axial skeleton on the posterior side. On the anterior side, we also have, included in the axial skeleton, the sternum, which is actually 3 bones which are fused together. And then of course we also have the ribs. Now there are 12 ribs, 10 of which are actually attached to the sternum via this, what you see as blue material, which is cartilage. And then there are 2 ribs down here, which are called the false ribs or floating ribs because they do not attach to the sternum. And they're very small. There are occasions where these ribs are removed to be used as bone grafts. The ribs are one of the locations in the human body that most average people have 12, but some people have more or less. Our own famous Mrs. Kopp has an extra rib on each side. Now the appendicular skeleton is designed a little bit differently. The appendicular skeleton are all the appendages that come away from the axis. So the axial skeleton makes up the main frame of the body, and the appendicular skeleton makes up a more mobile structure in the human body. So let's look at the appendicular skeleton, and this is what we call the upper appendicular skeleton. It consists of the clavicle, which you can see here, and then the other portion of the shoulder girdle can be seen on the posterior aspect. This is the scapula. This bone, the major bone of the arm, of the upper arm, is called the humerus. Now if we continue distally in the arm, we see there are two bones in the lower arm, which you would consider to be your forearm. Now this skeleton is in anatomical position. Thumb out, palm up. This bone on this side is called the radius. The radius, along with its partner the ulna, are the two bones of the forearm. The radius is always on the thumb side. The ulna is always on the pinky side. When a person turns their hand over, as you would if you were opening a door with a doorknob, and your hand would flip like this, you can see that the radius and ulna switch positions on the top side, from inside, medially, to lateral. So the only way to know which bone is which is to identify them on the distal side of what is on the thumb, the radius, and what is on the pinky, the ulna. You can also identify them in structure if you get a little closer and understand how they're organized here. The ulna makes up the elbow. So if we look posteriorly, this bone right here, traveling up, makes up the ulna. This bone makes up the radius. And this is more of your wrist structure. These small bones, which there are 8 of, are called the carpals. You may have heard of an issue called carpal tunnel, and we'll discuss that. But this is an opening on the palm side of the carpals through which a tendon, an artery, and a nerve run to reach your phalanges, your fingers. These bones are called metacarpals, and they make up what you would consider to be really the palm of your hand, whereas these carpals are actually further back, just distal to where you would wear a wristwatch. These are your phalanges, and there are 3 kinds of phalanges: proximal, medial, and of course distal. And these bones, of course, are congruent, they're same on both sides. Here, we can see the bones of the lower appendicular skeleton. Let's start with the coxal bones. The coxal bones are the bones of the pelvis. There are actually 3 bones here: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubic bone. Again, these bones are fused together. Now the blue material is not bone. This is cartilage, this is fibrocartilage, and this actually connects the 2 sides. You can notice that the sacrum of the axial skeleton is found in between. This bone is called the femur. This is the longest and strongest bone in the human body and is typically about 1/4 of an individual's height. We can oftentimes, if we find remains, identify the height of the individual by measuring the femur. Moving distally, we have a small sesamoid bone. This is a short bone called the patella. Sesamoid means sesame seed, and this is sesame seed in shape. There are a few other small sesame seed or sesamoid bones in the human body, typically in the hands and feet, and we will observe those when we can look at the hands and feet in more detail. The lower leg consists of 2 bones, the tibia and fibula. Unlike the radius and ulna in the upper appendicular skeleton, these 2 bones do not rotate around each other. They are stationary and fixed. The leg itself can rotate from side to side, but the fibula will always be on the outside, and the tibia will always be on the inside. So the tibia is on the medial aspect, and the fibula is on the lateral aspect. Continuing distally, we then find the bones of the lower leg and foot. These bones are called the tarsals. They make up the bones in your ankle. Now the actual bump that you feel on the sides of your ankle, the bumps that you feel on the sides of your ankle are called the medial and lateral malleolus. They are actually here to orient yourself. So this is the lateral malleolus, the bump on the outside of your ankle, and this is the bump on the inside, typically where you would feel a sprain. So these bones actually make up the parts right underneath what you might consider your ankle. This bone, one of the tarsals, is the one that you step on. These bones are called the metatarsals, and they would make up the portion of your bone where your shoelaces would be felt. And then finally, of course, we have phalanges again. And phalanges again, like in the hand, are made up of proximal, medial, and distal. These are all the bones of the entire skeleton.